Hello, my superstars. Have you ever felt blindsided by an emotion that just takes you back to a dark place? I have been there more times than I can count. It feels like the ground just disappears beneath your feet, and all you want to do is escape the pain. But thankfully, I'm here to tell you something important. There's a way through. Of course, there is. This is a podcast with positivity. Welcome to Bookends of Recovery, the podcast where we talk about healing, hope, and finding your way to a better life. I'm Laura, and I want you to know sobriety and healing are within your reach. You can make it happen. I know because I've done it, and I've helped others do it too. Today, I'm going to continue to talk about triggers. We're going to continue on with that series, but this time we're going to focus on emotional and outside triggers. Two big players in the recovery process. But understanding them can be a total game changer. And it can help you maintain your sobriety, but also build strategies that work in the real world, which is what we all need, right? So before we jump in, just a quick heads up. I've got a detailed workbook on my website, so be sure to check that out because it's packed with, actionable tools to help you move forward. And if you missed part one, just check out last week. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Triggers are emotional responses to specific stimuli. These are things that tempt us to use our DOC, which is our drug of choice, or, just fall back into unhealthy patterns, whether that's actions or thinking. And they can come from within, like emotional or mental triggers, or from the outside world, like situational or environmental triggers. And I get it. That was a mouthful. It sounds like a lot to manage. And it can feel overwhelming at first, but here's the thing. You don't have to tackle it all at once. Recovery is a process. It's not a race. As you move through it, you'll start to recognize your triggers and learn how to eliminate or manage them. I mean, how awesome is that? So, take a deep breath. You've got this. I promise you, I have been there. Messy, overwhelmed, unsure of my next step. But I went from just being that hot mess of, emotions to being emotionally sober, confident in my own skin. And I believe that you can do that too. All right, so let's start with the tough stuff. Emotional. Those emotional triggers, a lot of times they're tied to unresolved trauma or fears, neglect, and that can drive us to use our DOC or act in an unhealthy way as a way to numb our pain. And some of those emotional triggers can be things like shame, guilt, loneliness, anger, fear, abandonment. So if you're struggling with any of that, it's not unusual. I've felt every one of these emotions creeping in at, different points in my healing journey and in my recovery journey. One moment that stands out, and thankfully I was in counseling at the time, so I was able to talk it over, but I remember a memory of past abuse had surfaced out of nowhere. It just blindsided me. I was sobbing and just overwhelmed by these intense emotions. And I remembered the advice that my counselor gave me, which I will never forget. She said, don't analyze it, just feel it. Because I was somebody who wanted to figure out why this was happening and how, all the things. And you just can't do that when you're going through a trigger. It really was a turning point for me. I'd spent years, locking my emotions behind like this imaginary door in my mind. Like I can still see that door because I did it for so long. It was like this big wooden door. But once I allowed myself to feel and process my emotions, those triggers began to lose their power over me because I was learning how to address them and navigate them and let them go. They just, they don't have the power anymore. And one of the really cool things is we learn more than we realize through experience. So as we're going through this journey and as we experience our triggers, each time that happens, when we do something, when we grab that tool from our recovery toolkit or our healing toolkit, our brain is moving towards that healing, that recovery tool. Now let's talk about the external world. Outside triggers, those can come from, people, places, objects, or situations that are linked to your past use or your past hurt. And these can spark what feels like an automatic response. The good news is your brain is malleable. I really hope there's someone out there right now going, okay, now she's going to say it's one of her favorite words. But with time and effort and, of course, the right tools, our minds can be retrained. That is such a pivotal and important part of not just my recovery and my healing, but also it was pivotal for my husband, just knowing that our brains had the capacity to be retrained, just being able to look at it from that scientific way. It was just, I don't know, for both of us, it just kind of clicked. And so dealing with outside triggers, that it can come with making some tough decisions. So, this is where we have to pull on our big thinking caps and tough girl, tough boy pants and be like, okay, do I have any toxic people or enablers in my life? You got to ask yourself. And if the answer is yes, then it's time to set some boundaries. You guys know I love my boundaries, and that's because I struggled with them so hard. So once I was able to put boundaries in place, it was like, oh my gosh, it really does make life easier. And it was just not just the big things, but just little things that you wouldn't even think of, like especially when I was going through healing. And I just remember I was just, because I took like a summer to just focus on one aspect of my healing. And so that aspect was so draining. So I was working and I was doing that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. And I remember one of my kids was like, hey, can you make such and such for dinner? And I was like, oh, I got to take care of the kids. Got to do this. They come before me. And I remember thinking, that meal is so exhausting. I do not want to make it. And I just looked at them and I said, no. And it sounds so small, but to me, it was big, because normally I would have been like, yeah, hang on, let me put all my stuff aside. Let me put away the fact that I'm tired and exhausted and take care of you. And so just being able to have the power to say no to even the small things was a game changer. So if you find that you have trouble with boundaries, take a look at that and see what you can do to strengthen them. And you'll also need to create what I lovingly call, a sobriety circle or that healing hive, which is a group of those trusted people. And those are the people who are going to uplift you. They're going to hold you accountable, and they're going to support you. And they're going to do that without judgment. These are your go-to people. And we want to make sure that we are surrounded with people like that, because I made the mistake of trying to do it alone. When I first quit, I did it cold turkey. And then what ends up happening, I relapsed. And then I was, white knuckling it for years and had emotional chaos in my brain. I don't want you to have to go through that. I want you to start your journey on the right, on the right path. So it doesn't matter if, which way you decide to do it, because your recovery is your own and we're all too unique. But make sure that you are surrounding yourself with healthy, like-minded people, right? We want positive people who are going to lift us up, not people who are encouraging you to, quote unquote, cheat the system. And also you need to think about what kind of places, you're going to, these outside triggers, like whether it's bars or parties or, seemingly innocent spots, like it could even be a coffee shop. These can carry memories of your DOC or of your trauma, whatever you're trying to heal from. Don't worry. Avoiding triggers doesn't mean you're just going to become like this hermit in your house. That's not how it works at all. It means being prepared and using recovery tools to navigate these situations in a safe way. That saying, it's better to be prepared than not prepared at all, which I just screwed up the saying. But you know what I mean. Just have an awareness of, is this, if I go here, is this going to make me trigger? And if it is, how do I avoid that? Or how do I eliminate that? How do I manage it? And so that's what we're going to talk about right now, are strategies to help you manage your triggers effectively. And so the easiest thing to do, and one of the first things, is get rid of any of those reminders. So, like for me, quitting smoking, I threw out my quote-unquote go-to lighter, which was a favorite Zippo, because every time I looked at it, it was almost like that Pavlov, am I saying that right? Pavlov's dog. I would want to smoke a cigarette, and so I had to throw it away because I was like, no, I can't do that. But I didn't throw out just my favorite lighter. I mean, I threw out ashtrays, the one in the backyard, the one, and for those that smoked that came over, I was like, sorry, man, I'm trying to quit right now. It's just the way life is. And I think the most painful thing was, throwing out the cigarettes that were left in the carton, because I was like, I'm literally throwing money away. Like, this is going to be expensive. Why am I doing this? But I really wanted to quit. And that was that story I talked about, having the rubber band around my wrist, because I didn't know any other way to, I didn't have any grounding techniques back then. It was 20 years ago. So, that was foreign to me. So I would, anytime I wanted a cigarette, I would snap the rubber band and then eat. I used to bring baby carrots. So I had those everywhere. But, small steps like getting rid of those reminders can make a huge impact. You can also start a journal or use my worksheet on my website to track your triggers. And when we do this, it helps you identify patterns. So your patterns can be anything from, those people, places, or situations, or even being in an area that triggers those emotional responses. So when you use a tracker, it helps you create a plan to address it, right? You can be like, okay, so here's my pattern. Now what can I do to either change my response or manage my response? Now, it might sound a little strange, and we've talked about, talking out loud, because it really does work. It's powerful. But pausing to ask your trigger, what do you want from me? It can disrupt its hold over you. And if that feels like too much, try asking yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Because a lot of people are not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to talk to my trigger. That's silly. And that's fine. But just, then ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to let me know right now? And one of my favorite techniques is meet it, greet it, transform it. And that just means when you meet it, acknowledge the emotion. Greet it, name it. So is it fear, anger, rejection? Those emotions we talked about earlier, shame, guilt. And then transform it. You want to shift it to gratitude. So, for example, instead of, not just the glass is half full, but think, I'm grateful to have a cup. Because gratitude rewires your brain toward positivity. And I remember when somebody, may have been in AA, where they were talking about gratitude and having an attitude of gratitude. And I just remember, because I think I was first going there, and I was rolling my eyes like, whatever. And because I'm someone who's very resistant to all these things, and you got to tell me a million times before I'm going to pick it up. That's how I was. And I was like, you know what, let me just give it a shot. Because even though I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes, I'd be like, accept that, because that doesn't sound great. So I remember it's like, all right, I guess I'll just start with like listing the gratitude things and whatever. But then it started getting deeper and deeper. And sure enough, like my attitude started getting more and more positive. And I'm not saying I was a negative person. I'm just saying I learned to appreciate things on a deeper level. And once I started appreciating things on a deeper level, there was almost like this shift inside me where it was like, what do I care if this dude cut me off in traffic? Or, I don't care that, because the little things were just irritating to me. And so once I learned how to be more grateful, I was able to let things go a lot easier. If like a triggering situation is coming up, we just had the holidays, so like a family gathering or maybe a stressful event or a tough day at work, create an action plan. I have a very detailed action plan on my website that can help you do that, but they don't have to be as in-depth as that one. Just know that, okay, this is what my day is going to look like, or this is what my week is going to look like, my weekend is going to look like. These are the potential triggers I may face. So what can I do? What do I need to have? We talked about having that go bag accessible to you, knowing grounding techniques, making sure that you have a safe space, whether that's somebody's bathroom, who cares? It's just a place where you can gather your thoughts and use some of your tools. It doesn't have to be this grand thing. It just needs to be that you acknowledge what you're going, what you're about to do in that triggering situation that's coming up and planning for it. It's better to need a plan and have it. No, that's not right. I'm going to get it. I know. It's for your action plan. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Bam, got it. Okay, so something else I've talked about just a few minutes ago was counseling, right? Invest in yourself. The money that you spend is worth it, especially if you've got any kind of past trauma. A therapist and someone specializing in addiction can be life-changing. It's okay if you're not ready for that part yet. I mentioned, my past abuse. I did not address my abuse right when I decided to go into finding emotional sobriety. I just wasn't ready yet. That took a little bit of time, but so I was okay with doing like support groups and stuff. And then I went into counseling. So it just depends on where you are in your journey. I will say there are certain areas that I chose not to explore at the recommendation of my counselor because it was just going to do more damage to where I was. And so, but she was amazing, an absolute rock star. So, yeah, just, and if you're not ready for that yet, a life coach, especially like either a life coach or a recovery coach, can be a huge help. And I'm not doing that anymore, but I will tell you that it's a great way to have action steps for accountability, to give you a guideline. And so just keep in mind that life coaches are not therapists and they cannot help you address any kind of past trauma or anything like that. And always remember, recovery, it's a learning process. So keep an open mind, try different meetings, try different support groups or counseling methods until you find what works for you. Like I said, like I was in AA for a little bit and they were great. And that's where I learned about emotional sobriety. And then they took me as far as they could, and I chose to move on. I have no animosity towards them or anything, but I chose to go into different recovery and support programs, which, one was an online platform, and that's actually where I learned a lot about CBT, and then, moving on to my counselor, same thing. And so, yeah, it's just amazing what's out there. But if you do choose to go to, different meetings or support groups or whatever it is, find what works for you and give it a chance. I will say that different meetings, different support groups, they all have different vibes. I recommend going 6 times at least to whichever one it is you're choosing, because one day it might be, super depressing because of whatever the topic is that's going on. Another day it might be a little on the, like, why are they talking about this? This has nothing to do with recovery. But then the next time you go, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've learned so much. So it just varies because everybody's different. So everybody's going to want to talk about different things. You are going to learn from new people that are there, from people who have been there for, a month or a year or 10 years. Somebody always has pearls of wisdom to share. And that's in non-groups, and that's in things like Smart Recovery, non-secular. That's also in support groups, wherever you find that. So just keep an open mind. And if one thing doesn't work, don't be like, well, screw it. I'm just not going to do anything. Look for something else. Stay active in your recovery because that will help you be aware. And when you're aware, then of course you're able to maintain your sobriety. If this feels, if managing triggers feels overwhelming, don't forget about giving yourself grace. Like, this is some big stuff, This is a journey, and every step forward, whether it's small or big, it's progress. And I don't want you to be afraid to not look at those small steps and recognize them, celebrate them, and see them as progress. A lot of us tend to just go, well, everyone else is doing that. What's the big deal? Who cares? You're doing it. That's your progress. Don't negate it. So please be sure to visit my website for the free workbooks or resources. I have a ton of resources on there. If you are looking for like groups or, support groups or meetings to join, my website has a ton of stuff. And let's connect. I love hearing from my listeners. Message me on Facebook at Bookends Addiction Recovery, or join the conversation on my blog at bookendsofrecovery.com. Share your story with me, your thoughts, your wins. I would love to hear how all of you guys are doing. You take care, my superstars. You've got this, and never forget how valuable and worthy you are. I am rooting for you. This is Laura wishing you a wonderful day because you deserve it.